Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the latest webinar in our series MES and Industry 4.0 Success, Learning from Leaders on the Journey. My name is Chris Parsons from Critical Manufacturing, and I'll be your host today. I want to welcome you to the sixth webinar in the series entitled Managing Extreme Vertical Integration with a Single MES. Our webinar today is being broadcast live and will take approximately 1 hour in total. We're running this series because recent analyst research shows that only a small percentage of companies are claiming success in their digital transformation initiatives, such as Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing, and IIoT projects. But despite that fact, industry leaders understand the importance of creating the right strategies matched with the right technologies to stay ahead in the market. In fact, the vast majority of companies are confident that the rewards far outweigh the risks and are still forging ahead in digitizing their operations and trying to discover the best approaches for success. Our goal is to highlight those successes in this series. So before I introduce our featured speaker today, I want to quickly cover a few items about how to participate on the webinar today. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen that there's a panel. You can select the orange arrow to open and close that panel. And below that, you'll see a box where you can submit your questions as you think of them. Craig will be answering questions at the end of the presentation today. The webcast is also going to be recorded and will be available to view on demand in the coming days, and we'll send a link to everyone that registered for today's presentation. Our featured speaker today is Craig Pinegar, who is the Director of Manufacturing IT at Ultradent, a global dental manufacturing company based in Utah, USA, that has experienced non-stop growth for over 40 years. Craig has 29 years experience in selecting, implementing, supporting, and extending manufacturing and supply chain applications across a variety of industries, including electronics, semiconductor, aerospace, capital equipment, CPG, and medical devices. In his current role at Ultradent, Craig is responsible for manufacturing IT vision, strategy, and architecture. In this webinar, Craig will talk about the challenges of implementing MES in an extremely vertically integrated environment, encompassing the disciplines of chemistry, engineering, automation, robotics, and more, mostly in-house. Many will tell you that modeling and integrating MES with other systems is challenging enough, even when your factory makes just one type of product with similar flows. But what if your MES implementation includes a variety of manufacturing modes and products and types and volumes and varying degrees of automation? What if your industry is strictly regulated, as it is in MedTech? And what if your task is to implement all this variety in a single instance? Well, that's the ultimate goal of our featured speaker today, and he's here to talk about it. It's my great pleasure to introduce Craig Pinegar. Craig.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to take you on a whirlwind tour of a company in the early stages of a rather complex MES implementation. Having just gone live with our first pilot, we've begun to gear up to tackle even more of our vertically integrated manufacturing operation. So we'll quickly cover how we got here, what we've learned so far, and what's next. Let's start by acquainting you with our company. Ultradent was bootstrapped by Dr. Dan Fisher in the 1970s. Like many medical device makers, Ultradent was born out of a procedural problem that one doctor was trying to solve that no product on the market could. Now more than 40 years and 4,000 shippable products later, Ultradent has grown organically to fill the needs of professional dentists across the US and in more than 120 countries around the world. Ultradent was built by dentists for dentists. We have our own product R&D, sales and marketing, clinical and regulatory affairs. We provide education for dentists and clinicians around the world. We also have an active humanitarian function. Because of our many moving parts and complications, we like to say that we're a small company with big company challenges. Major product families include professional, grade whitening, preventive care, preparation, veneers, bonding and etching, tips and syringes, root canal, tissue, impressions, finishing, orthodontics, crown and bridge, and curing light, laser, and other equipment, to name a few. Ultradent is the ultimate do-it-yourself company and prides itself on vertical integration. To set the stage for our MES story, let's have a look at our several value chains. Most of what we produce starts with chemical batch or subassembly manufacturing. Manufacturing processes include compounding and formulation, injection molding, CNC machining, print shop, high-speed automated and manual filling lines, final assembly kitting lines, electronics assembly, and many other specialized value-added operations. Chemical batches and subassemblies flow into assembly, filling, and kitting operations by product line, making up our major business units. We also have a certified QC laboratory and capacity dedicated to making product for other customers, OEM customers specifically. Our products ship directly to dental offices, governments, and universities around the world. We also have a growing number of regional warehouses and sales offices in our larger regions. Adding to the challenges of our vertical integration is our product mix itself. As Chris mentioned, we have high volume low mix lines and low volume high mix lines, and many of our subassemblies make their way into many of our finished good variants. Our chemistries all have shelf life, which means that traceability, genealogy, lot attribute inheritance, and FIFO material handling practices must be systematically enforced and recorded at every step. We use a single global instance of our major level 4 systems such as product lifecycle management, document management, quality management, and ERP. And now we intend to implement MES as a single instance across our manufacturing operations in Utah. If this looks like a multi-site MES implementation, it almost is, and we almost have to think of it that way. So why MES? Well, 3 years ago, our president kickstarted our company-wide digital journey and appointed leaders to create a digital vision and roadmap. Objectives and key results are the way that upper management communicates strategy. And paperless manufacturing was a measurable key result meant to show progress towards that objective. Then manufacturing, engineering, and IT got together and understood that paperless manufacturing was just an indicator, but not the end game. Paper on glass would be enough to make paper disappear from the shop floor, but it was not enough to deliver other important manufacturing objectives such as compliance and risk reduction, efficiency and velocity gains, and ultimately become a visibility and data-driven manufacturing organization. We really needed a true MES. So we began our search for a winning MES platform and partner, but with over 70 commercial MES options available, how did we pick ours? A horse story might be appropriate here. American Pharoah was a Triple Crown and Breeders' Cup winner, but the real story lies in the theory that led the owner to bet the farm on this 2-year-old. Until that time, most young thoroughbreds were bought and sold on outward appearance and pedigree alone. But what if there was an invisible X factor? A theory like, in order to run well, horses needed oxygenated blood and lots of it. How would you find such an animal among the herd? Well, what made this otherwise unremarkable horse special was the size of his heart, quite literally. The buyer bet everything when he saw that the left ventricle and spleen on his ultrasound machine were off the charts huge. American Pharoah was proof that Grand Slam winners are born and made. So back to our MES story. We started by considering all the options, including the option of building our own MES, while also shopping for a commercial off-the-shelf system. There is no MES specializing in the dental products industry, but there were a few with decent medical device, drug, CPG, batch, or manufacturing pedigrees. and that was enough to narrow the field for us to about 10. Using our own survey, we assessed functional fit, configurability, extensibility, customizability, and we also looked very hard at MES candidates that could support a model-centric integration approach, given the IT services and integration patterns that we knew we would have to build to integrate MES with a variety of other systems. This narrowed the field further to our final shortlist. So RFPs, reference calls, and demos later, the race was almost too close to call, but the deciding X factor for us was choosing a vendor with a model-centric MES who would double as our system integrator, giving us a greater visibility and input into their future product roadmap. Not only did we buy a great horse, it came with a great trainer. So how much to bet on MES? Now that we had picked the software and partner, the next question was how big should our opening bet be? Too big and we may not see benefit for a long time and risk that the entire solution could miss the mark. Too small and we could be stuck in pilot purgatory forever. Big Bang was ruled out immediately, but deciding on the size and scope of our first pilot was a significant process. To develop our MES implementation roadmap, we started by taking inventory of our strengths and weaknesses. We were very new to MES and studied concepts, best practices, and lessons learned from other multi-site MES implementations. We read everything we could get our hands on. We went to conferences and classes, and we discussed our situation with consultants and references. If we were going to succeed at taking this journey ourselves, we had to learn to think and speak at a whole nother level. We had a capable IT department with decades of experience in enterprise systems, and a talented engineering group who could build physical machines and control systems all day long, but we had never worked together strategically to transform manufacturing. At first, we didn't know what we didn't know, but our research and training gave us a kind of MES pigeon that the teams could learn to speak with each other and know what had to be done. Eisenhower has said, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So next, it was time to get all the stakeholders in the room and start planning the pilot in some detail. Before making the first cut, there were process and functional requirements, strategic and business requirements, technical requirements, project management, and people considerations. We looked at whether to use MES to automate the way we already did things versus taking the opportunity to re-engineer our manufacturing processes first. We used all kinds of brainstorming tools, SciPoc, process flows, rolls of butcher paper, and pounds of yarn and sticky notes to produce value stream maps. We produced solution documents and prioritization schemes to arrive at an initial scope, which we dubbed our minimal viable product. With so many perspectives, it took several rounds to arrive at consensus, and our partners were heavily involved from the beginning to teach us how to model our business in their MES and how to address functional software gaps. Change of this sort is hard, but it should also be fun. Of all the famous quotes that we listed on the board, the most repeated today is still this: MES will do that. It's almost a bumper sticker. So we eventually did arrive at a definition of a pilot. Weeks of workshops later, we managed to get this in writing: detailed scope, project plan in terms of a minimal viable product. In other words, what had to be true in order to produce our first batches of product using MES instead of paper. This is what we came up with. Minimally, our pilot had to model an end-to-end value stream for a product line, substantially representative of at least half of our business. For us, that meant formulations, syringe filling, and final kitting. Minimally, our pilot had to include functionality and all data collection that a fully electronic batch record would require. Minimally, our pilot had to include IT and OT integrations to support work order management, material management, labeling, optical verification, scale integration, and IT infrastructure with high availability, high security, and disaster recovery built in. Minimally, our pilot was the basis of validating the MES platform so that future functionality could be validated in smaller, more digestible units. And last but not least, our pilot had to build a core team skill set that could support remaining MES rollouts across other product lines and areas in the years ahead. something like a center of excellence. We would model our factory and processes in MES with a focus on manufacturing execution, data collection, and exception management. We decided that PLM functions and document management would remain in PLM, and planning, scheduling, inventory, and cost management would remain in ERP. Speaking about integrations, MES would need to synchronize with PLM, ERP, and labeling in near real time through more than 30 custom services that IT and our partner built together. Those services use a combination of RESTful APIs and JSON messages handled by our middleware and message queuing. For level 2 integrations, we configured drivers in the MES, which communicate with IPCs and PLCs, scales, and other instrumentation through OPC UA. Okay, here we are. 1 year later, our pilot is live and now teaching us lessons and gathering data we could not dream of having in a conference room. Our freshman year may be over, but our sophomore year is just beginning. If the first milestone was a minimal viable product, the next milestone is a minimal scalable product. Robust change management is the next big challenge ahead of us and our partner. We can have as many as 500 affected items and documents on pending change orders at any given time. And since our goal is to convert paper into MES process steps and data collection points, our change management workload and complexity is a critical input to MES that can be both time-consuming and error-prone without great capability built into the product. So we're hammering out enhancements to facilitate this high-volume change management, along with other important improvements to poka-yoke weighing, dispensing, downloading, filling, and kitting. Enhancing and mistake-proofing our material handling processes is also a focus. Simultaneously, we're also modeling the next manufacturing lines with similar manufacturing flows and data collection characteristics. And our future roadmap includes modeling new manufacturing lines, enabling new MES modules, uptaking MES product upgrades, and of course, new customization. To support customization, remember, we are do-it-yourselfers. So we are building a joint DevOps pipeline capable of supporting our partner and in-house developers at the same time, merging both sets of code into deployable packages that can be validated together. Our core team is actively training additional modelers, controls engineers, IT business analysts, and developers, while future areas are also being vetted and prepared for their turn. A big change in the way we will run the project going forward is switching from a waterfall to an agile methodology. Our MES roadmap looks ahead about 3 years, but our modeling and development backlog includes detailed user stories for the next 2 to 3 quarters. We're constantly refining the backlog according to stakeholder feedback and changes in business direction. We are also actively collaborating with our MES partner on future capabilities. So upper management has liked what they've seen so far. The pilot looks gorgeous, and they're excited about what possibilities there are in the future. Their question to us is, what would it take to get MES rolled out everywhere now in half the time? The answer, like always, is it depends. We're constrained by the size of the team, their skill level, and the focus. We're also constrained by the maturity of the MES product itself, the preparation of future manufacturing areas, and by our friend, software validation. But to say it a different way, implementing MES can only move at the speed of trust. So what might that mean? Well, first, we need to remember to take care of our people and invest in them. For a change as significant as MES, it takes ongoing education and investment in stakeholders at every level, including sponsors and stakeholders, product owners, modelers, developers, project managers, scrum masters, architects, IT admins, controls engineers, and our partners. We all must learn from each other every day. We're still speaking that kind of pidgin and using hand signals at times, but MES is gradually becoming a common language. Next, it's important to remember to deeply understand your physical processes and information flows. There's no substitute for actually walking the manufacturing process, tracing the information flows, and observing those handoffs and decisions made by real people in the real world. The end game for MES is to become data-driven. So even while implementing, remember to collect and analyze data as you go. Direct observation coupled with anecdotal feedback and empirical data are tremendously powerful together. Next, remember to design MES to adapt, scale, and to last. If you get the people and the process and data collection right, the technology almost suggests itself. That said, any MES needs extraordinarily high security, high availability, and disaster recovery by default. MES also needs to be able to scale horizontally and vertically and retain data for years and years and years. And yet, it needs to be able to adapt to constant changes in product mix and manufacturing process and procedure, which is why, again, robust change management capabilities are so critical. Methodology matters. Transitioning from waterfall to Scrum is an unnatural change for us, but something as critical and risky as MES certainly warrants it. We believe it's absolutely essential. More important than the empirical nature and iterative and incremental mechanics of Agile are the values that it demands. Values like commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. Scrum requires transparency, trust, and courage. Bad news happens and it must be communicated early and often, and adjustments made as you go. A project with this many moving parts cannot run smoothly without generous helpings of thank you, and I'm sorry, let's try that again, to lubricate things. MES cannot succeed without a team of individuals and a partner that embody these values every day. And a quick word on software and process validation. Software and process validation can triple the time it takes to implement any non-GMP software project, but for good reason. Validation is really documented trust. Time spent validating the right things is far cheaper than time spent in remediation. So make validation work for you. Know the difference between verification, which is that the system performs against specifications, and validation, which is that the system assures availability, security, integrity, traceability, and ultimately user, consumer, and patient safety. Know your critical process parameters and critical quality attributes and the risk level of each during the design phase. Validated correctly, MES can eliminate the need for double human verification, another benefit that paper on glass cannot provide. To conclude my presentation, my inbox has about 1,700 emails from vendors and publications this year telling me that these are uncertain times. I guess they may be onto something. The COVID-19 lockdown created a precipitous drop in business for us, as you can imagine. For a nail-biting couple of months, dental offices around the world were forced to close. As our business struggled through the worst months of this pandemic so far, most projects were necessarily put on hold. MES, however, was not. Our core team and our partner worked from home to deliver our pilot on time, only masking up and going into the factory when necessary to interact with production equipment and personnel directly. We feel there are 1,000 ways for any company to become irrelevant, even in more certain times. This company has operated successfully on paper for its first 40 years, but the next 40 years require a new level of sophistication to remain relevant. I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to taking questions and interacting with you more in the future. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you for your great insights on your implementation. So now we're going to go into the Q&A section, and Craig will be answering questions. So if you do have a question, just type it into the box that I mentioned earlier on your control panel. But we have a few questions right here. Let's start with, so Craig, if you're ready, can you say more about the challenges of mixing batch and discrete manufacturing in a single MES?
Yeah, for us, chemical batch manufacturing and discrete manufacturing are really different physical processes, and they come with their own set of risks. They're two very different animals when you look at them. Some companies or plants specialize in one or the other, but doing them both requires you to be sort of eclectic and think of ways to close those gaps, minimize those risks, and ensure the handoffs between the two. Just to give you an example, the units of measure are quite different. We deal in weights and volumes with the chemistries, while everything else is pretty much discrete in the rest of our plants. And at every transaction, there's the potential for gaining or losing some chemical amount. We also have what we call lot inheritance or lot attribute inheritance and first expired, first out expiry date management. Those are things that we have to be conscious of as chemical moves out of the formulations area into our filling stations and then into our kitting stations. All of those dates and lot attributes have to be inherited by the primary and secondary packaging. So it makes for a challenging environment to marry all that up to show great traceability and to get your labeling correct.
Thanks, Craig. So we've got a question here regarding ERP integration. Can you talk about the challenges associated with ERP integration?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is driven by your philosophy. I've worked at plants or know of plants whose MES implementation is completely divorced from their ERP systems. And so the handoff in some of those simpler environments might be for the ERP to send a production schedule down to the plant. Everything else is executed at the plant level, and then completions and inventory receipts are sent back to the ERP. That's as simple as it could be. For us, we have a more tightly coupled situation where ERP was already doing a very good job of managing schedules, managing cost, managing inventory, managing traceability and genealogy. And so we are looking at MES as sort of a front end to tackle the execution of the shop floor, while the work order management, the bills of material, the routings, and all of the material transactions are mastered in the ERP. So we have to have near real-time integrations, not only for work orders that are passed between the two systems, but every movement transaction, every material issue or return transaction, every scrap, bonus, or loss transaction have to be set up as a message to go between our MES and our ERP. And those transactions are typically done in a round trip fashion in a matter of seconds. So we've chosen to make MES not divorced from ERP, but really sort of a very tightly coupled augmentation of ERP.
And there is another, actually, we have a lot of questions to do with integration, Craig. So the next one is to do with have you or do you plan to integrate your MES with your QMS system?
In our situation, our PLM system and our quality management system are the same. And so all of our non-conformances, our CAPAs, our customer complaints are done in our PLM system. In our MES, we have a lighter weight version of a deviation that can occur. We're using what's called protocols out of the box to capture process deviations on the shop floor. Some of those may turn into an NCR, in which case we will create that NCR in our quality management system. In other cases, we're able to close the protocol because it's a low risk and doesn't impact the product quality. And we'll keep that protocol record inside the MES itself. So while we see MES as having a lot of quality data in it, it is not what we consider our primary quality system. Our PLM system does that job for us.
Understood. As it would in a lot of medical device companies. The next question is to do with your reason why you chose to go for a large single instance. So the question is, you've chosen to go for a large single instance, but why that decision versus multiple instances and the reduced risk brought by multiple instances if there's an issue with MES patching or downtime, etc.?
That's a really good question. So far, we're making it a goal to do it all in one MES if we can, and that's pretty much because it follows the pattern of having one PLM and one ERP managing all the transactions for what is basically one company on one campus. So it's a great starting point for us because we think that is manageable, it's understandable by IT, by operations, etc. However, because MES demands higher availability than any of those other systems, it's just got to be available all the time. Patching can bring it down. It's going to stop production every time we do a patch. We're conscious of that, and I think there may be a threshold that we reach at some point in the future where we decide, you know what, we just have to break it up into 2 or more MES instances, just for no other reason than high availability. So we haven't reached that threshold yet, but we're not opposed to breaking it into multiple instances if it serves high availability in the future.
And next question. We have a ton of questions here, Craig, so be prepared. Did you learn any best practices to minimize the need for customizations to your MES system based on different product types?
Let's see. I don't know that we are experts at developing best practices. We do have some rules of thumb that we try to follow. We always try to work with our partner to see what we can do out of the box before we start to develop custom libraries and custom GUIs and custom reports. So we always take the approach of out of the box first, but there are some cases where it's just not possible for the core product to keep up with our specific needs, whether it's chemistry or handling lots of small discrete units or label integrations. So we do have a fair amount of customization that the product just can't handle, at least at this time. So it's usually for us a conversation. Let's see what we can get out of the box. We like to model and configure first before we write code. But that said, we've already got a growing library of custom code.
Interesting, thank you. And regarding the challenges with change management, can you say more about any challenges with change management in your environment?
Yeah, we talk a lot about feedback loops in our digital vision. The reason for going digital instead of paper is to have feedback loops. Of all the feedback loops that MES can possibly deliver, the one we feel we have to get right is the comparison of as built versus as designed. And in our environment, we have a very high volume of changes that are impactful across many products and documents. We can, repeating a little bit what we talked about in the presentation, our bills of material are deep, but we also have a lot of components that are shared by multiple finished goods variants. And so any sort of a change to a document or a label template or a bill of material can have far-reaching impacts. And what we're seeking in the product to help us manage that impact analysis is just very good insight into if I change this component, where is that component used? Or if I change this data collection point, where is that data collection point also used? So hopefully that's the gist of why it's so important for us to get it right. We have a lot of products and a lot of impact analysis that goes with every change order.
And well, let's move on to a question regarding validation work. What have you found, Craig, to make the software and process validation work for you?
I think that actually started a few years before MES came along. We started to look into validation as a process to see how we could streamline that everywhere. Because all of our systems, the majority of our systems anyway, are GMP systems. And so we started with a GAMP5 model, but then we've also worked with consultants to help us understand better how to streamline that. And we've come up with a risk-based approach that follows GAMP5 pretty much, but the way we frame it and the way we prepare the traceability matrix is done largely up front. To give you an idea, for validation, there has to be a traceability matrix that you can present to an auditor where the requirements and specifications are passed through a hazard analysis, and then your test protocols are developed and executed. That all has to trace and tie out. So what we feel works best for us is building that process. We've given it an acronym, RSHT. We really try to build out our traceability matrix in the design phase. So as we're going through a list of, say, 1,000 requirements, maybe 100 of those have a high risk associated with them in terms of safety for a patient or an operator. Those high risk ones have to be mitigated in some way, either through software design, SOPs, or other measures to bring the high risk down to a moderate or a low risk. So that thinking goes into our design so that when the developers deliver some code or a new feature to us, we've already got the traceability matrix prepared, we've got the test protocols written, and it's just a matter of executing then the test protocols to capture evidence that the system has been validated and that there are no high risks remaining. So to sum all of that up, I think it's basically start your validation process in the design phase, and you'll do fine.
Thank you. So the next question really has to do with the management, how the management believes in the system. You mentioned in your presentation that management at Ultradent wants to get MES rolled out everywhere as soon as possible. And the question is, what are the top reasons that your senior management believe that MES will be transformative for the company?
There were some savings in our business case associated. There were some hard savings associated with sweeping paper off the floor and digitizing that information for sure. But really, we feel that when we're operating on paper, all of the data that we're capturing and collecting goes into an archive never to be seen again. So we're lacking the data to do good analysis for continuous improvement. We're lacking the analysis to find out what went wrong in the case of a something like as bad as a recall, it's very hard to drill down into a paper archive to find out what happened and when, and see a pattern in that behavior that drives you to creating a measure or a mitigation and preventing that from happening in the future. Said another way, that paper is locked up and we lose visibility and we lose that closed loop for data analysis at every level. We don't have that shop floor to top floor visibility, and we also don't have good reporting or dashboarding in terms of what's actually happening on the shop floor. So unlocking the data is important to upper management, and also at the same time enforcing correct behavior to follow the recipe, so to speak.
Makes perfect sense. So I'm going to make this the last question, Craig, just to finish up. We have a ton of questions, so if your question is not answered here, and there are way too many for us to answer in the time, but we will be sending a document with answers to all of those questions in the next few days. So don't worry, your question will be answered by email, and you'll be able to refer to the answer and the others. So Craig, the last question would be, and this is the big question: what would you do differently now if you could?
You know, it would always be good to be born smart, but we started off not knowing a lot. I think that the thing that we could have asked for more support for in the beginning was just a dedicated team. Once we had our team established, we struggled to peel the team away from their day jobs to do the MES project. And so just about everybody on the core team was wearing multiple hats. And to be honest, we were part-timing the MES project. So if we could do anything better or differently, it would be to ask for those people to be sort of divorced from their day jobs to focus on the MES project right from the beginning. And by then, I think by now we might have even more experience and knowledge than we have at this point from doing it part-time. So that's also an ask for more focus going forward. We want to make sure we protect the team, dedicate them to MES, and grow that team as we move forward as well.
Well, thank you, Craig. Those are all great insights. Hope everybody enjoyed the presentation today. I want to thank you for your time today, Craig. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to possibly doing some more things with you in the future. So before we leave today, we have done a number of webinars in this series. In fact, now including this one, we have 6 that are all available on demand, and you can access those webinars and different insights from different companies and some of the top partners out there for MES implementation at webinars.criticalmanufacturing.com. And those are all available on demand. So just go there and sign up and take a look. And we will be adding more webinars to this series in the future. So look out for the invites and check back often. But with that, thank you, Craig. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And at this point, we will close. Thank you.
Thank you.